So I wasn't around in the days pre-privatisation, but I have lots of colleagues who were, and I recognise exactly what you're describing. For us, the 5-year funding settlements through our regulatory process, they're called 5-year control periods, are absolutely fundamental to stable long-term planning and enabling us to be confident when we're planning year on year what's going forward. As we were reclassified as part of that whole process, we have put in place a framework agreement between us and government, and a key plank of all of that is that the regulatory regime remains in place. We continue to have a 5-year control period settlement, and that's for us a really important part of being able to plan and deliver confidently. So yes, it currently remains in place. I of course can't say what will happen in future worlds, but that's there. That's very important.
All right. Yes. So did any of the politicians want to? Do you want to go first? No, you want to speak?
Yeah, I'm very interested in this question. It's a very important question. I'd just like to clarify that if there were a Green Party influenced government or indeed a Green Party government, we would of course take a very different view. We wouldn't starve the trains of investment. You wouldn't have the problem. Under BR, the trains were often starved of investment because the governments didn't really believe in the railways. Now, Chamali says, oh, well, if you had a publicly owned railway system, they'd have to go into competition with the armed forces or whatever. No, they'd go into competition with the roads. Right? We'd take the money out of the road budget, put it into the rail budget. It's really very simple. And Chamali says, well, yeah, but the railways are a business. No, the railways aren't just a business. They're a public service, and that's the ethos that we need to be returning to. Yeah? Daniel says, well, customers demand this, customers want that. They're not just customers, or I would say they're not customers at all, they're passengers. We're passengers. As soon as we use the word customers, we've got our way of thinking about the railway system wrong. And I hear all Daniel's policies about, oh, we're going to ensure that you pay the fare which is the lowest, and we're going to have a public competitor and so on. It's all just a substitute for our policy, which would be a silver bullet for all of these things. And you know that, Daniel, and you know that's why the overwhelming majority of your own activists wish that your party had our policy.
Right.
I thought we were supposed to answer the questions, but I'm attacking each other.
I answered the question.
And I can certainly do the responses, but if I can just respond on this thing, because I think it is quite an important question. The control periods have made a huge difference, as I said, to be able to plan. Because we have had for many, many decades, not enough. And how do you work out what to do? And the answer is you should do all of it. I was in a meeting with Susan Kramer recently arguing for tracking for the Liverpool Street line. And she was saying the thing is, every scheme is essential to do urgently, because it just didn't happen over the last 40, 50 years. So you do have to get that, but it also means that you have a rationale, you have a timescale where you know you have to get things done. So we got the western section of East West Rail done because we managed to get all the plans and all the detailed work done for a particular date rather than being allowed to drift, so that it could be built in the current control period. For the next bit of East West Rail, the control period starts in 2019, which means you have to have detailed bids completely ready, knowing exactly where it's going to be, how much it's going to cost, how it will be built, for 2017, I think is the cut-off, which means knowing your route by 2016. So it forces that agenda. It means that it can't drift. There is a huge pressure at the moment on Network Rail to get on and do it. And actually, the idea that we all know which route we should use, given the old route can't be used because there's all sorts of telescopes and houses and things on it, means that we are forced to actually get that work done. And Network Rail are doing a fantastic job working it out. They're down to 7 routes, but it takes time to get it right. So actually, getting into the 2019 control period is pretty good for East West Rail. I really look forward to it.
Did you want to say anything?
Yes, I did want to. I mean, part of the problem with the rail industry is it's a very capital-intensive industry. It's a very long-term industry. And in some ways, we can all do political point scoring in terms of, this happened then, this happened then. Frankly, a lot of the things that we've had in the last couple of years were a consequence of investments planned and made during the previous government's period. Equally, there will be things that come on stream in the next few years will be a consequence of this government's plan. The railway industry does not fit the parliamentary cycle, frankly. And I hope we can have a decent amount of consensus to make sure that the really big projects that are going on, the Crossrails and Thameslink and so on, continue to be funded in a sensible way, because these are very, very long-term projects. So each political party trying to claim credit for it, I'm afraid, doesn't really hold too much water. The long-term funding is really important. And I do think it was one of the things the last government did try to do, was move local government and most public services away from the one-year funding, which we've had for many, many years, to longer-term funding, 3-5. And that's what we'll try and do again. But the reality is, that things happen in the world. You can't get away from the fact there was a financial crisis in 2008, and things alter. And just as the RPI +1, +3, etc., some of these have been short-term political fixes again. And I've got nothing against there being a political fix that brings prices, that brings fares down a bit. But that's what some of that is about. So I think we should be realistic about this and understand that for an industry like the rail industry, the thing that really matters is getting those long-term funding decisions right. And I think what I can say on behalf of my party is that we will try and make sure that we do not play politics with much of that, and that we keep those long-term, really important investments in the right place. I'll just say in response to Rupert, there are some very easy headline-grabbing things that you can say on these issues, but the difference is a party that's actually likely to go into government has to act responsibly and actually think through its policies. Your leader today was asked, I think on Radio Cambridgeshire, how some of these things were going to be funded and what the top rate of tax would be. And she said they hadn't worked that out yet. I think that tells you all you need to know, really.
So if I could
If you want to say something,
just
you don't
very
have to,
quickly, it's on the point of, I just want people to know, Charles said it earlier, that Network Rail does receive a grant from the government. And that means that the government has some investment in the rail industry. So it's not all about privatised companies coming in and just passengers. There is the taxpayer element that is going in to the rail industry. The key thing at this election, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not got a strong economy, you have not got the money to spend, forget it. It's over.